What kind of woman risks her entire marriage for a secret she thought she'd never have to confess? How far can self-justification go before reality catches up? When my husband found out what I'd done, he didn't shout. He just walked away, and the silence that followed was worse than any punishment. I always thought love was supposed to feel like a choice you never had to question. Ethan was safe, steady, the kind of man everyone told me I was lucky to have. He made coffee every morning, folded my sweaters the right way, even remembered the little things, like which mug I hated because the handle pinched my fingers. People said we were solid. Predictable, maybe, but solid. And I believed that for a long time. Until Adrian came back into my life. He sent me a message one evening out of nowhere. Just a photo of the lake where we used to sit in college, no caption. I stared at it for 10 full minutes before replying. That one picture cracked something open I didn't even realize was still alive inside me. I told myself it was just curiosity, a harmless reconnection. Ethan was already asleep beside me, his phone charging, his breathing calm and steady. I remember thinking how unfair it was that something so small could wake me up completely while he stayed peacefully unaware. At first, I hid behind politeness. I said I was happy, that marriage was comfortable. Adrian joked that comfortable sounded like halfway to dead. I laughed because part of me agreed. He talked about how he never stopped wondering what could have been. I told him to stop saying things like that, but I didn't block him. I couldn't. It was like feeding a tiny fire just to see how far it would spread. I started taking longer drives home from work, sitting in the car before walking inside. Sometimes I'd look at our house and think about how carefully we'd built our life, how I could burn it all down with one bad choice. I didn't plan for it to go that far. I just wanted to feel something again, something wild and mine. When Adrian mentioned the surgery, I laughed at first. He said I could make things right, that I could carry the piece of us we never got to have. It sounded insane, romantic, but insane. Then I started thinking about it at night, when Ethan was asleep beside me, about control, about legacy, about love that didn't follow rules. By the time I convinced myself it was a symbolic gesture, not betrayal, I'd already found a clinic that would do it quietly. Now, when I think back, I don't remember deciding anything. I remember moments, the hum of the fridge in the dark kitchen, the flicker of my phone screen, my own reflection whispering that it wasn't really cheating if it came from love. That's what I told myself the morning I booked the appointment. That's what I kept telling myself while Ethan kissed my forehead and left for work, never knowing what I was about to do. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The morning it started, everything looked normal. The coffee machine hissed, sunlight hit the counter in that same calm way, and Ethan stood in front of the fridge reading a spreadsheet on his phone like always. I remember thinking how ordinary he looked. Grey t-shirt, hair slightly messy, glasses sliding down his nose. I should have felt safe. Instead, I felt restless. He asked if I wanted eggs, and I said I wasn't hungry. He gave me that look, the quiet concern that used to make me feel loved, but lately just made me feel trapped. I told him I was fine, just tired. He nodded, not pushing it. That was Ethan's way. Never pushing, never demanding. I used to brag about how easy he was to live with, how peaceful our marriage was. Now that peace felt like silence. While he packed his lunch, I scrolled through my phone pretending to check emails. Adrian's name was right there in my recent messages. Just seeing it made my pulse jump. I told myself I wouldn't answer, not after the last time we talked, when he said he dreamed about me. But curiosity won. I opened the chat and saw a new message. Still thinking about what we talked about. You don't have to decide yet. I locked the screen before Ethan could glance over. My stomach twisted. I told myself it was nothing. Just conversation, just history. Everyone has someone they wonder about, right? When Ethan kissed my cheek goodbye, I felt his breath against my skin and guilt like a sudden wave. But then he smiled that small, patient smile and said, "Don't forget you've got your checkup at 4. He was reminding me about the doctor appointment I'd invented as an excuse. I smiled back, thanked him, and watched him drive away. At work, I couldn't focus. I stared at the open HR portal, half reading employee requests, while thinking about the message on my phone. The office buzzed quietly around me, phones ringing, keyboards tapping, but it all felt far away. Sophie stopped by my desk to drop off a report and noticed my blank stare. "You okay?" she asked. I said I was just tired. She raised an eyebrow like she didn't believe me but didn't press. At lunch, I sat alone in the break room, pretending to eat while replaying old memories. Adrian and I sitting in his beat-up car outside campus, promising we'd build a life together someday. We were so young, so sure. When it ended, I told myself it was for the best, that Ethan was stability after years of chaos. But part of me always wondered what if. By 2 o'clock, I'd made up my mind. I texted the clinic's anonymous number, the one Adrian had sent me weeks ago, confirming my consultation. The receptionist replied instantly, polite and professional. It felt scarily easy. I told Sophie I had to leave early for a medical appointment. She nodded, too busy to ask details. The drive there felt unreal, like I was watching myself from outside my body. The city rolled by, people crossing streets, kids holding ice cream cones, everyone busy with their own small stories. I wondered if any of them were living lives as carefully built as mine. The clinic was in a quiet building downtown, neutral walls, soft music, friendly voices. I kept my sunglasses on when I checked in, like that would hide the truth. The receptionist handed me a clipboard of forms. My hand shook as I filled in the blanks. "Emergency contact?" she asked. I hesitated, then wrote Ethan's name without thinking. The irony almost made me laugh. Inside the consultation room, the doctor talked about procedure options and safety. I nodded at all the right times. My voice sounded steady, even confident. I said I wanted to go through with it privately, no partner involvement. The doctor didn't question it. She just wrote notes, professional and calm, while I pretended this was all rational, all fine. Afterward, I sat in my car in the parking garage and stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My makeup looked perfect. My life looked perfect. But I felt like someone else had borrowed my body. My phone buzzed. Another message from Adrian. "You'll feel better once it's done. It's what we both wanted." I typed back, "I'm not sure anymore," then deleted it before sending. By the time I got home, Ethan was already back from work. He was on the couch, laptop open, typing something. He looked up and smiled. "How was the appointment?" he asked. I said it went fine, routine stuff. He nodded, trusting as ever. That word, trust, echoed in my head until I excused myself to shower. Under the hot water, I thought about how easily I lied, about how I could stand there next to a man who would do anything for me and still crave someone who made me feel like fire instead of calm. I told myself I deserved more than comfort, that love without risk wasn't real. That lie was easier to live with than the truth. When I got out, Ethan had left a note on the counter. "Dinner's in the oven. Don't stay up too late." I smiled at it like it meant nothing, then opened my phone and scrolled back to Adrian's message. My thumb hovered over the screen for a long time before I finally replied, "I'll do it." As I pressed send, the front door clicked shut behind Ethan. The quiet sound of his life moving forward while mine veered into something I couldn't undo. The morning of the surgery, I woke up before dawn. The house was silent except for the soft hum of the heater. Ethan was still asleep, one arm draped over my waist. For a second, I almost changed my mind. He looked so peaceful, so trusting. Then I remembered Adrian's message from the night before. "It's now or never." Those words burned behind my eyelids. I slipped out of bed and moved quietly through the house. I told Ethan I had to leave early for a team meeting. He mumbled something half asleep, kissed my hand, and went back to dreaming. The lie tasted bitter on my tongue, but I swallowed it easily. I'd been practicing. The drive to the clinic felt like floating through fog. The streets were still empty, and the city looked soft and harmless in the morning light. I played the same song Adrian once said, reminded him of me, pretending it was fate guiding me instead of guilt. When I parked, I sat in the car for a full minute, fingers clenched around the steering wheel, waiting for something. A sign, a reason to stop. Nothing came. Inside, the clinic was bright and cold. The receptionist smiled, handed me new consent papers, and asked if my partner was coming later. I said no. She didn't press. I kept my answers short, efficient. It felt like a business transaction, and I told myself that was good. Emotions would only make it harder. While I waited, I scrolled through old photos on my phone. Ethan and me at the beach, him carrying me in the surf while I laughed. Then one of Adrian and me years ago, his hand tangled in my hair. Our faces so close we looked like a single person. I stared at that picture longer than I meant to. I told myself this was closure, not betrayal. That this wasn't about cheating. It was about rewriting a story I never got to finish. The nurse called my name. Everything after that blurred. The smell of antiseptic, the cold table, the doctor's calm voice explaining each step. My heart thudded so loudly I could barely hear her. When it was done, she said I might feel dizzy, that I should rest for a few days. I nodded, pretending to listen. Outside, the air felt too bright. I texted Adrian, "It's done." His reply came in seconds. "You're incredible. We did it." We. That word made me smile, then instantly hate myself for it. I didn't go straight home. I stopped at a rooftop bar I'd been to once with Sophie. It was lunchtime now, people laughing around me, music soft and easy. I ordered a drink I didn't even want and sat facing the skyline. The city stretched out below, so alive, so indifferent. I wondered if Ethan was still at work, typing away, trusting me. Sophie texted to ask how the doctor thing went. I almost told her the truth. Instead, I typed back, "Fine, just routine." Then, for reasons I still don't understand, I added, "I think I did something brave today." She replied with a laughing emoji and said she was proud of me. If she'd been there, maybe she would have seen the panic behind my smile. A couple at the next table asked if I could take their picture. When I handed the phone back, the flash went off accidentally, catching me in the frame too. The man laughed, said, "You're part of our memory now." He had no idea how true that felt. For a moment, I let myself imagine a future where this secret stayed buried, where Ethan would raise a child he believed was his, and Adrian would disappear back into memory, everyone happy in their own way. I almost convinced myself it could work. Then my phone buzzed again. Adrian sent another message. "When can I see you? I want to be part of this." My stomach turned. I typed, "You can't. It's complicated." He replied with a single word, "Coward." I put my phone face down and stared at the city. The wind picked up, blowing hair into my mouth. I realized I was shaking, not from cold, but from the weight of what I'd done. Still, I finished my drink, smiled at the waiter, and left a generous tip. Acting normal was easier than feeling. Back at home, Ethan greeted me at the door. "Long day?" he asked. I said, "Yeah, exhausting," and kissed his cheek before he could study my face. He held me a second longer than usual. I froze, afraid he could somehow feel the difference inside me, but he just whispered, "You're warm," and went back to his laptop. That night I lay beside him, listening to the quiet rhythm of his breathing, and tried to tell myself this was love, that lies built on longing could still count as love. My phone buzzed again on the nightstand. I didn't look. I already knew who it was. I just turned it face down, closed my eyes, and whispered into the dark, It's all for the best. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance, then faded away, leaving only the sound of Ethan's steady breath beside me and the faint echo of the flash that had caught me smiling at the bar. By the time the first ultrasound appointment came, Ethan was acting different. Not angry, not suspicious, just careful. He asked fewer questions, watched me more quietly. I told myself he was being sweet, protective even, but deep down I felt the shift. His love used to feel like warmth. Now it felt like surveillance. I'd been trying to hide the nausea and exhaustion, pretending I was fine. He noticed anyway. "You should rest more," he said one night while making dinner. I told him I couldn't rest when there was so much to plan. He smiled gently. "You don't have to do everything alone." That word, alone, hit me like a joke only I could hear. When the doctor confirmed the pregnancy, Ethan teared up. I held his hand, squeezing it just enough to look convincing. Everyone congratulated us. Friends, family, co-workers. Sophie hugged me so tightly in the break room that I almost cried for real, but not from happiness, from fear. She asked if Ethan was excited, and I said yes, of course. Then she said softly, "You look scared, Mara." I laughed it off, told her hormones made me emotional. At home, Ethan started documenting everything. Baby names, nursery paint colors, weekly photos of my growing belly. He made spreadsheets to track expenses and appointments. It should have comforted me, but each new list felt like a reminder that the truth could destroy all of it. Every time he said our baby, something inside me flinched. One evening, his mother, Janet, invited us to dinner at her house. She adored Ethan, but had never fully warmed to me. I put on a loose dress and my most polite smile. During dessert, she said, "You're glowing, dear. Pregnancy suits you." I thanked her, forcing a laugh. Then she asked casually, "How far along are you again?" Ethan answered before I could, quoting the exact number of weeks. Janet frowned slightly, calculating something in her head. "That's odd," she said. "I could have sworn you mentioned your checkup was earlier." I felt the blood drain from my face. Ethan didn't notice, too busy explaining due dates. On the drive home, he hummed along to the radio while I stared out the window. My heart raced. Did she know? Had I slipped before? I told myself she was just making conversation, but the unease wouldn't leave. That night, Ethan fell asleep beside me, and I lay awake staring at the ceiling, counting the weeks over and over. The next afternoon, at the pharmacy, I was waiting to pick up prenatal vitamins when I heard two women whispering near the counter. "Did you hear about that fertility clinic downtown?" one said. "Apparently some donor cases got mixed up. Total mess." My stomach twisted. I kept my head down, pretending to scroll through my phone, but I caught the words, fake paperwork, and scandal. My hands were shaking when I paid. When I got home, Ethan was in the living room working on his laptop. "Everything okay?" he asked without looking up. I said yes, just tired. He nodded, then asked, "You got those vitamins I told you about?" I mumbled something about the brand being out of stock. He didn't push, but I saw the smallest flicker of concern cross his face. Later that evening, while I was folding laundry, my phone buzzed. It was Adrian. "When do I get to see what we made?" I froze, staring at the words. He was reckless, always had been. I typed back, "Stop messaging me, it's done." He replied instantly, "You can't erase me that easily." I deleted the conversation and blocked his number, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear the TV from the other room. 2 days later, at a family restaurant with Ethan's relatives, I tried to act normal. Everyone asked about baby names, nursery colors, all the expected things. I smiled through it, pretending everything was fine. When Ethan excused himself to take a call, his cousin joked that I looked too good for first trimester. I laughed, said it was good skincare. Janet just stared at me for a moment too long. Then Ethan came back to the table, quiet. His phone was still in his hand. "Everything okay?" I asked. He nodded slowly. Work stuff, he said, but his eyes didn't match his voice. That night, when we got home, he didn't talk much. He just sat in the living room staring at the dark TV screen. I asked if he was tired. He said, "No, just thinking." I told him to stop worrying so much, that he'd make himself sick. He turned his head toward me and said quietly, "I'm not the one who's sick." I froze. My heart jumped into my throat. Before I could speak, he stood up, kissed my forehead, and went to bed. I sat there, motionless, until my phone pinged again. A message from Sophie this time. "Hey, is that you in this picture?" I opened it and nearly dropped the phone. It was the photo from the rooftop bar, the one where I'd been laughing right after the surgery. The clinic's logo was visible on the glass door behind me. I stared at it, every muscle in my body tightening. Sophie added, "It's going around in a local group chat. You okay?" I didn't answer. I just deleted the message, then deleted the photo, as if that could erase it from the world. In the next room, I heard Ethan closing his laptop. The sound was soft but final, like a door shutting slowly. For the next week, the silence in our house felt heavier than noise. Ethan wasn't angry, at least not in any way I could recognize. He still made coffee in the mornings, still asked if I needed anything from the store, but his voice had lost its warmth. Every conversation was polite, measured. He had started sleeping in the guest room, saying it was because my tossing and turning kept him up. I didn't argue. I didn't want to hear how calm he sounded saying it. One night, I woke up and saw the light from under the guest room door. I listened for a while, thinking maybe he was watching TV. Then I heard the soft clicking of a keyboard. I told myself he was just working, but that same unease returned, sharp and cold. The next morning, when he left for work, I glanced inside the room. The desk was too neat. On top of it sat a small stack of labeled folders: household, accounts, medical. My name was on one in neat handwriting. I told myself it was nothing, just his usual organization. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had become a project. At the office, Sophie avoided me. She used to stop by for coffee or gossip, but now she barely made eye contact. When I cornered her in the kitchen, she looked uncomfortable. "I didn't mean to make things weird," she said. I asked what she was talking about. She hesitated, then said, "That picture, Mara. People are saying strange things." I told her it was taken ages ago, some misunderstanding. She nodded quickly but didn't look convinced. By the afternoon, she'd unfriended me online. That weekend, Ethan's mother hosted a family gathering at the community hall. He insisted we go together. I thought maybe this was progress, that he wanted to present a united front. But when we arrived, I realized it wasn't unity he wanted. It was exposure. Everyone stared. Conversation stopped when I entered the room. Janet greeted us with her usual half-smile, then guided me toward a table of relatives I barely knew. "You've been quite the topic lately," she said softly, almost kindly, like a nurse preparing to deliver bad news. Ethan stood across the room, talking quietly with his brother. Every so often I'd see him glance my way, expression unreadable. I tried to keep smiling, answering small questions about cravings and nursery themes. Then Janet leaned closer and said, "You know, dear, it's strange how timing works out. Some of the family are wondering, well, maybe it's none of my business." I asked what she meant. She hesitated, then said, "It's just that Ethan told us your last cycle was long before the date you mentioned for conception. He's very detail-oriented, you know." The air left my lungs. I forced a laugh and said, "Pregnancy math can be tricky." She nodded but didn't drop her gaze. I excused myself and went to the restroom, where I stared at my reflection under the harsh fluorescent light. My smile looked painted on, my skin too pale. I whispered to the mirror, "Hold it together." When I came back out, Ethan was waiting near the door. "Everything okay?" he asked. His tone was neutral, but there was something behind his eyes, something quiet and final. I said I was fine, just tired. He nodded. "Let's get through the evening," he said, and walked away before I could answer. Later, while everyone gathered for group photos, a little cousin tugged at my sleeve. "Why doesn't Daddy smile anymore?" she asked, pointing at Ethan. The question hit like a slap. I managed to laugh and said something about him being tired, but everyone nearby had heard. Conversations faltered again. Ethan turned, looked at me for a long second, then simply walked out of the hall. People started murmuring. Janet came to my side, placing a careful hand on my shoulder. "Maybe give him space," she whispered. I nodded, pretending to agree, but inside I was panicking. Space was the last thing I could afford to give him. When we got home, Ethan went straight to the guest room. I followed, standing in the doorway. "You can't just walk out like that," I said. He didn't look up from the papers he was sorting. "I can do whatever I need to," he said softly. I crossed my arms, trying to sound calm. "You're making people think something's wrong." He finally looked at me then, tired, composed. "Something is wrong," he said, "but we don't need to make a scene." I laughed, too loud, too brittle. "So what? You're just going to ignore me until I disappear?" He gathered his papers into a folder and stood. "I'm not ignoring you, Mara. I'm just observing." It was such a strange, deliberate word that I didn't know how to respond. He walked past me, heading downstairs. I heard the faint sound of the front door unlocking, then closing. The house went still again. For hours, I sat in the dark living room, scrolling through my phone, looking for a message from Adrian, from anyone. Nothing. The silence pressed against me like a wall. I wanted to call Ethan, but the words I'd use, "sorry, please, help," felt too small to fix anything. Sometime after midnight, headlights swept across the window as Ethan's car pulled into the driveway. Relief surged through me. I met him at the door, trying to sound casual. "Where were you?" He didn't answer right away. He just took off his jacket, hung it neatly, and said, "Thinking." "About what?" He glanced toward the folders he'd left on the table. "About next steps." Before I could ask what that meant, he brushed past me and went upstairs. I stood there, staring after him, realizing I no longer understood the man I'd married, or what he was planning. Upstairs, a door clicked shut. The sound was soft but final, and for the first time, I felt the full shape of what I'd started. Ethan barely spoke to me after that night. He didn't yell, didn't accuse. He just drifted away. It was worse than shouting. At least anger means someone still cares. His silence felt like a wall built brick by brick, and every time I tried to climb it, he just stepped back farther. We moved through the house like strangers renting the same space. In the mornings, I'd find his coffee mug washed and upside down on the rack, the bed in the guest room neatly made. He still did chores, still paid bills, still took care of everything, but without warmth. It was mechanical, like obligation had replaced affection. I told myself it was just stress, that once the baby came, everything would change. That lie was the only thing that kept me from breaking. That night, I found him in the kitchen sorting receipts. He looked up, calm but distant. "Just organizing," he said when I asked. One folder read, "Household Copies." My chest tightened. Later, I heard him on the phone, voice low, deliberate. "I'll bring what's needed." The next day, a note waited on the counter, "Meeting downtown at 10:15. When I joked at dinner about him being a secret agent, he said quietly, "You don't have to force this, Mara." I snapped, and he just replied, "Not yet." That night, I found printouts, our bank statements, my messages, even call logs. When I confronted him, he said, "I needed clarity." His voice was calm. Sophie called later, warning me he'd been asking questions about clinics. That evening, on the balcony, I told him he was overreacting. He said, "Then explain it." I couldn't. He just nodded and started writing in a notebook. "For clarity," he said, "I'm going to handle it properly." The next morning, I went to his office, ready to beg. Instead, a man handed me an envelope. "You've been served." Ethan watched as I read the court papers, DNA testing and custody. His face was tired, not angry. "You made your choice," he said. "Now I'm making mine." Then he walked away, and the doors closed between us. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.